How are you all doing? Have you been behaving since I was last here? Well, quite a few of you are here already. Nisi, some of the mods, Sharon, Stephanie. Stephanie says her son at a robotics competition. Terry Dean, Karina, Marta Aldama, Two Dog Night. I think that's AKA Batman. Sharon Tuck, Sylvia Rogier. Welcome to the Transit Lounge 2 Dog Night. So I'm not going to really be able to show you Timmy this time because it's this arm that is injured. There's a quick view. If I'm holding my arm here, it's just because it's not to show you my arm, it's just because this is the most comfortable position. I fell on my arm yesterday. Yesterday mid to late morning, and it was a pretty hard fall. It's actually quite surprising how strong the human body is. Like I would have expected broken bones, punctured lung, blood in urine, and none of it. So I do pull-ups and I do swim. Maybe that has given me strong triceps. So I think that is what happened. I'll talk to you guys more about the actual fall at the end if I've got I don't want to say the stomach for it, but if I'm awake enough. I am quite tired and I've got some pain pills here, which make me a bit drowsy. So I kind of want to get to work, and then if I've got like a second wind, then I'll take you guys through that. But I think it's the part that I got injured is the muscles or ligaments between the ribs. I think my rib cage bore the brunt of a very hard landing on a dirt track. And I was going about 30 kilometers an hour. I was going over 30 kilometers an hour. And I sort of feel like I can begin to appreciate what Helena Hutchins went through with a bullet through her abdominal, and also what Van Gogh went through. It's a really horrible feeling. It's so difficult to move. So, are you there? Huh? Okay, I'm going to show you Ivy quickly, assuming she can. Okay. So you guys normally get to see Timmy. Well, here's Ivy. She's probably going to not be here for very long. There she is. Bye-bye, Ivy. there she goes. Okay. Won't you please get me a glass of water? Okay. As you can see, I've got like a second year helping me to cope. My girlfriend's just sort of been very attentive. So I did put some photos on Instagram if you guys want to see a bit more. Toy says sounds like a mountain lion got you. So some might think so. Timmy's right down here. He's right down here, but I'm not going to lift him up. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, thanks. Okay. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, my father and sister were actually here a little bit earlier for a little chat. Thought criminal. I will, Karina. Thanks for that. Sageti Nana says inflammation to the cartilage of your ribcage can be very painful. It is very painful. It actually feels like it's crunching in and out of line. If I'm in a, like right now while I'm talking to you, it feels like my ribs are sort of crunching in and out of line, almost like a broken eggshell that's just being flexed slightly. So it's definitely quite painful. I didn't know whether I should go for X-rays, but there's not really any bruising. There's a bit of a red mark, but there's no bruising, there's no discoloration. So, and I am able to move this arm, and I am able to breathe. So I can't cough. Coughing definitely hurts. Elizabeth Gregory, yeah, I made the live. Nisi says, I've broken 3 ribs before. Hurts to talk and breathe. I was able to drive back, so using this arm. But yeah, it hurts incredibly if you get into your seat and then you must sort of shift to the left. You realize all the ways that your rib and your triceps, if you think of a snake, this part of our body is the upper torso is kind of the similar part to a snake's body. A snake's got hundreds of ribs, and that allows the body to twist. We don't twist a lot as people, but we do twist a little bit when we bend down to pick something up, and that is when it really hurts. If I bend forward, it really hurts. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys a bit more about how it happened and I think why it happened when we're done. Amy says, I'm a registered X-ray technologist here in the US. I'll take your X-rays. Yeah. Do you think it's necessary to take X-rays? I mean, isn't it not qualifying as serious enough for that? You weren't chasing chipmunks. No, definitely wasn't. It's actually a very silly way that this happened. Timmy, I'm sorry, I can't pick you up. Maybe I can. Okay, there we go. Okay. What are lower abs? I don't think it's a lower ab thing. I hurt my ribs under my armpit, that sort of area. It's that upper chest area where your ribs are, that sort of curl around your lungs, that area. I have applied some medical tape. Amy says, I'd only get imaging done if you were seriously short of breath. Thanks. So that is what I thought. I'm not in a great way, but I'm okay. That's sort of how I took it. Show us your arm again, okay? That's that side of it. And then that's that side of it. Okay. So there are about 100 of you guys in chat. I think we should get started. I don't know if all of you are that interested in that sort of things. So we're going to deal with pages 102 to 112. The last time we dealt with 92 to 102, part of 102. We're going to go through the remainder of the April 5th interview. It's quite an epic interview from Barry Morphew. Let's just have a look at your last comments before I jump in. Nisi says, looks like a shark bite. Karina says, probably the ribs are cracked. I don't know if they're cracked, but I think it's the ligaments and muscles between the ribs that took a beating. I think I'm lucky that I've been swimming a lot and doing a lot of pull-ups. That has given me a bit of shielding. I think that helped me. Okay, let's go. Okay, guys, so here we go. So at this point, Barry had been speaking for quite a while, and then someone came home, presumably one of his daughters, and then Barry actually asked to continue the interview somewhere else. Okay, Timmy. At the fire station. So that's the part we're going to deal with now. At 11:41 in the morning, agents followed Barry inside the station while he spoke on the phone. While being seated, Barry said he was working on a project at the river property. Now, if you think about that, it seems like Barry's making small talk, and he says, while he's sort of sitting down to continue their discussion, he's saying he's working on a project at the river property. Do you think that's just incidental? Do you think that's relevant? Do you think Barry wants them to go and sort of sniff around there? What do you think? Do you think it's completely significant or completely insignificant? It's just worth thinking about some of these by the way comments. Special Agent Grussing said investigators were trying to determine if anyone, independent of Barry, could provide a last proof of life of Suzanne. What's quite great about this line of questioning is they kind of almost putting the ball in Barry's court, saying, do you think we can find anyone else that saw her last, that spoke to her last, that knows something beyond the time frame you've given? And if there is someone, that someone's probably in some trouble. Of course, they sort of haven't been able to find that. And then they find another very clever way to show the discontinuity in Suzanne's timeline. It's a very clever way that they show it really to Barry, to say, Barry, what do you think of this? And as I say, all of these things on their own are not big smoking gun type things, but to me, you're going to have to go off. But put together, it does start to paint a fairly compelling picture. The question is it enough, right? Will it be enough to convince a jury? Is it a strong enough case? So Timmy's just gotten off now, wants to get on again. So he asked, what about the two people that saw her Sunday? That's, I think, Barry's question. What about the two people that saw Suzanne on Sunday? He added, I just heard there were two people. Special Agent Grussing interrupted, saying those leads had been covered. So Barry's kind of suggesting leads, and the agents are coming back to him to say, sorry, that's not, I don't have the words credible, but that's not something that's going to go anywhere, right? Special Agent Grussing told Barry that after 2:44 p.m., so after 60 minutes to 3 on that Saturday, no other person besides Barry could say that Suzanne was alive. Barry was asked if he could try working backwards to the events from Sunday morning to Saturday afternoon to see if more leads could be developed. So they're kind of putting the ball in Barry's court to say, can you think of anyone that saw Suzanne after you did? And as I say, if Barry can't do that, then you can see how the focus seems to inevitably go in a certain direction. I mean, if you say it's not inevitable, well, then where does the focus go? Does it go to a mountain lion? Does it go to sort of one of the guys that she friend requested on Facebook? It's not focusing anywhere. It's just maybe going somewhere else. But can you see how it seems to be moving in a certain direction? Barry was asked if he could try working backwards. Special Agent Grussing asked if the last thing Barry remembered about Suzanne was hearing her breathing. And that is quite a, what's the word? It's quite a physical, how can I put it? It's not just a physical description of someone, it's a kind of a guttural sensation. It's someone who is conscious and perhaps alive, but perhaps not necessarily conscious. In other words, someone who is tranquilized might be, you could hear them breathe, you might see them breathe, but otherwise they're not ambulant, right? And so this is all dealing with Suzanne's potential last moments. Barry said, no, the last thing I heard her do was snoring. He added, lightly snoring. And Special Agent Grussing asked if she was in bed. Barry said yes. So let me ask you guys a question. No, I didn't have a GoPro on my bike. Someone else did have a GoPro, but there was also people driving behind me when it happened. They said it was a really hard fall. I just know when I fell, there was like this dust, gravel spraying in front of me as I fell, just because of the speed. But yeah, I don't have it on camera. Sorry. Alison says, do x-rays. So let me ask you a question here. Wow, thanks a lot, Margaret. Thanks for that. Thanks, Margaret Zabinski. So let me ask you this question. Let me ask the first question first. Yes or no, do you think it's true that the last Barry did hear was Suzanne snoring? Yes or no? You think that part's true? Two Dog Night, I will try to get some video for you guys. Just give me a little bit of time. So Nisi says no, Serendipity no, Yvonne Phillips no, Leah no, Sylvia Rogier no. Stephanie says maybe some kind of labored breathing. Kirk no, Zircon no, Karina no. So I feel otherwise. I think that it is likely that the sound she made was either similar to snoring. It was a kind of almost like the kind of breathing or respiration you hear when someone's not conscious. In other words, I think it's possible if she was tranquilized that she would have been breathing in a way not quite similar to sleeping, not exactly similar to sleeping, but somewhat similar, right? A similar kind of steady breathing. Two Dog Night, thanks a lot for that. Nisi says he heard her gurgling. Now, bear in mind, we're talking not about her final moment. We're talking about in the final moment. So it's not necessarily the absolutely final moment. Okay. Anyway, so most of you seem to disagree here. Most of you seem to think that one of the last sounds he heard wasn't this snoring sound. I think it's likely true. That's just my opinion. And then the other thing I want to ask you guys was where he says if she was in bed. Do you think that that part is true? You think it's true that she was in bed, yes or no? Stephanie says, I agree. Thanks for that. Al Anders says they always mix a little truth in with the lies. Terry Dean says, yes, I think for in bed. Irish I says no. Get yes. Joy, yes. Kirk M says gurgling. So do you think that Suzanne was in bed right at the end? Sylvia Rogier, no. Zircon, yes. Yvonne Phillips says maybe near the bed. Cindy, aka Skinny, says yes, tranquilized. Stephanie says, I think she was in the bedroom because of the door frame. That's quite a good point. Quite a good point to make. NW Mama Bear says no. Karina says yes. Maria Bain says no. It's kind of a difficult one because we know that sheets were washed. I'm going to say no. I don't. Although I think the snoring is true or not completely untrue. In other words, the snoring is related to something that I think did happen. I don't think the bed part is accurate. It's like Chris Watts. I don't think she went to bed. I don't think they had sex. I think the bed may be relevant in that a sheet may have been taken off the bed or something like that. Or as Stephanie says, there was a bit of a chase and someone went into the bedroom. So that is possible. Karina says, I was thinking of the door frame as well. Zircon says, I was thinking of the sheets too. Cindy says, Barry said he left her sleeping. So anyway, that is his answer. It's quite important if you, the prosecutor, to kind of have an idea of not what Barry's saying, but what you think happened, and then what Barry's saying. You've got to keep an eye on what you think is the actual version of events. So in other words, you've got to have an actual version of events. And you might find over time that your actual version of events changes slightly, but it's very important. By the time you go to trial, you've got to at least have a version that sort of stands up to scrutiny. Someone can't kind of come up with a random point here and there and suddenly your version falls down. It's got to stand up to scrutiny. And so that's the question, does it? So Special Agent Grusing asked where Barry was when he heard her. This is a great question. So he says he hears her snoring. He says she was in bed, and Barry said, I was going from the bathroom to the kitchen just because I get ready in the bathroom. And so, yeah, Barry's got to locate himself within the fabric. You could either say of the crime scene or of the events that were taking place right then. So Barry says he was moving around from the bathroom to the kitchen. And now we go to page 103. And at the top of page 103, there's a photo of Barry with his arms folded. It's taken at quite a low angle. Barry was asked the last time he saw or heard Suzanne prior to that. It's quite an interesting question. So he's saying, what was the previous question? What is the last time? The last thing Barry remembered about Suzanne was her breathing, was hearing her breathing. So the last thing Barry remembers is hearing breathing, right, about Suzanne. He doesn't see her, but he hears breathing. Then it's like, okay, so that's the last thing you heard. What is the last thing you saw, and when did you see it, and where were you? So he said, just probably before we went to sleep, after we had sex. Special Agent Grusing asked what happened before that, and Barry said, before that we had dinner. When asked where he sat, Barry said, at the bar. So you can see how the investigators are narrowing him down. Exactly where were you? Where were you sitting? What were you doing? You know, and it's got to add up in terms of the timeline. And not only in terms of the timeline, but also in terms of the data showing him going to his truck, opening and closing the door. Does that fit in with what Barry's saying? When Special Agent Grusing asked what else he or she ate, Barry said, I don't recall. So, above that, Barry was asked what he ate and what she ate. What did Suzanne eat? He said, we split a steak because she never eats a full meal. Now, again, it's just me as a narrator, me as someone who's aware of books and stories and words. When I see the word split the steak, it makes me think of things in a different way. It makes me think of meat kind of cleaved in two. In a weird way, it actually makes me think of my own injury, that when I hit the ground, part of the steak of my ribs must have kind of flexed a bit like that, right? And it is just a very strange, to me, way of expressing we shared some meat, or we shared whatever, we split a steak. I don't know, it's just, to me, an interesting way of putting it. At this point, he's being told to remember what he's heard and seen. And so given that psychology of what's the last thing you remember hearing and seeing with your wife, he just happens to volunteer, we split a steak, right? And then he says, because she never eats a full meal. I wonder if that's true. I mean, I wonder if his daughters would verify that she never eats a full meal. Seems quite a global statement to make. Then Special Agent Grusing asked before that, so he's taking him slowly backwards through the chronology of that afternoon. Before that, Barry said, before that, I think it had to be when I got home from doing my bobcat with Crib, and she was outside laying out in the sun. We know that was a big moment. That was a moment she was sending a lot of messages to Jeff Libler, right? Something like, almost 60 messages in 2 hours, and the final selfie, right? So that was a big moment, and the question is, did Barry know what was going on? Was Barry performing a kind of surveillance? And he could have been doing that in two ways. The one is via the iPhone, the other way is via the cameras that had been put in the garden, I think, or in the yard. Anyway, so he says he arrives home. Suzanne is outside, laying out in the sun. He adds, I think I sat out there with her. Now, this is to me an incredible. If you put all these little tidbits of his sentence together, the context is really incredible. It's to me, it's kind of mind blowing, and that's why I've used it in the title of this live stream. So here he is. He talks about, I think I sat out there with him. What he's actually saying is, I, Barry, sat outside with Suzanne, who's, I guess, in a bikini, and she's just been texting her paramour and kind of also saying, guess who's not here, or guess who's alone, and now guess who's not alone. Now Barry's with her, and Barry's saying that he's sitting with her, and I guess is conveying that it's quite pleasant, right? Do you think Suzanne would have wanted him there? So this is where it gets really interesting. He says, I think I sat there with her, but I've said to you before, Barry is quite adamant about certain things. It's absolutely a certain way. Now with this, he's saying, I think I sat out there with her. Do you think Barry sat out there with her? Then he says, I don't know if that's when I did the Chipmunks or did the Chipmunks before I went to crib. I don't recall. And then there's a sort of unintelligible thing. And unfortunately, we can't hear the actual audio. But what's quite interesting in this particular moment, which is quite crucial, if you know the fabric of this case, Barry seems to be stumbling over what he's saying. He seems to be kind of stuttering. He's not able to vocalize exactly what he's saying, which is why they write unintelligible. But look at how he speaks. He says, I think I sat there. I don't know if that's where I did the Chipmunks or did the Chipmunks before I went to crib. I don't recall. Can you see it's kind of like a stumbly sentence? And it's at quite an important part of the timeline. And so there's a footnote here, number 76. This account of Suzanne laying out, I think this is a typo, inconsistent should be is consistent with her photo to Libler at 2:03 p.m., but counter to Barry's previous assertions that she was laying out when he got home at 11:30 a.m. So Barry was saying that she was already kind of tanning at 11:30, kind of almost suggesting that that episode or whatever happened in the morning. Now, what I think is quite interesting with this is, remember, somebody made the comment now in the chat saying that sometimes what is revealed is partially true. And so what you're getting here is certainly consistent with the photo taken. So they have that, they know the timestamp. And so in that respect, what Barry's saying aligns with reality. And that's also kind of a way to almost like put guardrails on the version that you're getting from, let's say, a suspect or whoever, is you start telling them what you know. You start telling them, well, we've got this text at that time. We know about this GPS data. And so whatever story they've been telling you, they are kind of fenced in, and they've got to start to, whatever they're doing within the story, they've got to start, there's an Afrikaans word, kraal. It's kind of like a fence that surrounds livestock. You've got to start to corral your narrative because of these kind of fence posts, right? And so this is kind of what's happening. which means if you're trying to be a bit wishy-washy, it's becoming a bit more difficult to go over those lines, if that makes sense. Stephanie says he was with her shortly after the photo. Yeah. So Stephanie seems to be jumping the gun a bit here. Excuse the pun. So Barry, the next thing Barry says is Special Agent Grusing said because of Barry's phone activity, the chipmunks would have occurred after the crib trip. Then Barry said, okay, then the chipmunks, she was laying out. I was looking. I probably went to sit with her while she was laying out, seen a chipmunk and got my gun and shot the chipmunk. That's the part that's really incredible, is he basically says, at this time, we have kind of the last proof of life. At the time that she's texted this photo. Now I don't know if Barry knew about that. I don't know if Barry knew she texted this photo, but that ended up being the last proof of life of Suzanne in a photo. Immediately after that, Barry goes and gets a gun and he fires the gun, and he's right by Suzanne, and then she's never seen again. So it's quite difficult to think. Let's put it this way. It's quite difficult not to think that maybe Barry did shoot a chipmunk at that time, but also not for the thought just to float across your mind where you go, okay, so Barry sat with her, she sent a selfie to the guy she was having an affair with. Barry went and got his gun. Barry shot chipmunks right then, or ... question mark. Right? It's fair to say this. It's not going, it's not jumping the gun to say Barry's guilty. It's basically just saying, yeah, maybe he shot the chipmunks, but maybe he did something else with the gun. I'm saying, if you're a prosecutor trying to make your case, do you think it's going to be a big leap for the jury to say, you're right, that's also a possibility, given that after this you never hear from Suzanne again. So could that gun have been used for something else? Let's just look at some of your comments. We say coral in America. Sky says, thanks, they've not been good times for me of late, but I'm glad to be here now. Karina says she's sunning herself while he does the chipmunks. Bizarre. The other thing is, it's kind of like a peaceful summer afternoon. It's sort of you lounging around, and then someone wants to be shooting right in that area. It seems a bit of a contrast or conflict there, doesn't it? Ken Dalton, couldn't Barry have cloned her phone? So he would have seen everything she sent and text. Maybe that's what pushed him to the edge. Purely speculating. It is possible. I mean, there are lots of different things. I don't know if Barry was that sophisticated. I do think it was something like being able to keep track of what she was doing on her phone via access to her iCloud. And he did admit that they had mutual access and that they, I guess, shared passwords. I think he later on said that she'd updated it or she changed it, which Chris Watts also said. Whether that's true isn't clear at this point. But the iCloud definitely gives one a avenue in which that kind of thing could have taken place. But there's also the cameras that were set up, which could have also provided that kind of surveillance. We know for a fact that Suzanne was spying on him with a spy pen. She was recording what he was saying. And we know that he was looking at her phone. He would demand to see her phone. So it seems like quite a lot of that was going on both ways, doesn't it? Ken says it happens a lot lately with smartphones. It does happen quite a lot. I think you've got to ask, was he that sophisticated? As a hunter, Barry was quite wily. And the question is, was he that wily online? And if he used a VPN, which it seems like he did, would he have gone that far? And bear in mind with Chris Watts, he used a secret calculator app, which is quite an exotic thing. And you'd think Chris Watts wasn't very smart, but what does it take to just Google, how to send secret messages or something, how to send messages that can't be traced, something like that. But it is an interesting area. Patricia Byrne says, okay, so let's just continue. Special Agent Grussing said because of Barry's phone activity, the Chipmunks would have occurred after the crib trip. Barry said, okay, then the Chipmunks, she was laying out, I was looking. I probably went to sit with her while she was laying out, seen a chipmunk, and got my gun and shot the chipmunk. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry to work forward from the chipmunk, and Barry said, I truly don't recall that. It's quite interesting. Barry's kind of almost putting his hands up and saying, I'm out. You want me to talk about after the chipmunk? I can't tell you anything. It's quite interesting that, right? It's like the last afternoon that he saw his wife. So, sorry, I can't tell you anything. Now, before I go on, there's something I want to address, which some of you will probably find worthwhile and interesting. Others might find it quite silly. But of late, there's been a little bit of what I call the anthropomorphization in true crime. So you know what it means for something to be anthropomorphic. Do you guys know the meaning of that word? Anthropomorphic. Do you guys know what that's referring to? I'll just put the word quickly in chat. Okay. Any of you know what anthropomorphic refers to? Patricia says animal-like, I think. Giving two dog nights is giving human traits to non-human things. Anthropology, it's not quite the same thing. Anthropomorphic, having human, Yvonne says having human characteristics. Caldoni says human trait attributed to animals. Okay, so the dictionary definition is anthropomorphic bears and monkeys relating to or characterized by anthropomorphism. Explanations of animal behavior in anthropomorphic terms. So explanations of animals in almost like saying human terms. Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human traits, emotions, or intentions to non-human entities, usually animals. So sometimes you'll see, they don't do it so much anymore, but you used to have dogs that walked upright, Puss in Boots, all sorts of animals that were like people, right? So it's kind of just giving animals human traits in a way, right? Now, if you think, and I'm talking about the anthropomorphism or anthropomorphization of true crime or anthropomorphism in true crime, however you want to put it. It might sound really hard to figure out what I'm saying, but you'll know what I mean in a second. There have been a couple of cases where at very critical moments, an animal steps in and suddenly, oh, that's what I was doing, right? So the one that I want to mention is, do you remember the raccoon in the Chad Daybell graveyard? Do you guys remember that? Stephanie says, is that what you meant with a deer? That's a good point. That's also part of it. So in the Chad Daybell case, you had Chad literally texting his wife to say, wow, I had this weird morning. I shot this big raccoon. I buried it in the pet cemetery. Well, do you think that raccoon is actually a raccoon, or do you think that raccoon is a proxy for someone or something else, right? That's really what I'm getting at. In other words, this person uses an animal who, in a weird way, symbolizes to that person, the person that they've killed, potentially. And so possibly in the Daybell case, that could have happened with a raccoon. I don't know for a fact. I'm just saying that's what it could be, maybe seems like, right? So just think about that. The Chad Daybell case, the raccoon, and then when they dig up the area, they dig up two bodies, right? I don't know whether I think the raccoon, where the raccoon was buried was it where which child was buried there? Do any of you know? In other words, if you were going to match the raccoon to a person, which one would it be? Anyway, yeah, a substitution of that's it. Okay, so that's one example. Another example I want to give you is a little bit indirect. It's just something to think about. In the Casey Anthony case, I'm not quite sure how she communicated it. I don't know if it was by Facebook message or by text. I can't remember how it was, but she explained that there was a smell of a dead animal around her car, in her car. Does anyone remember what animal she used for that? Can anyone remember? Let's give you guys a few more moments. Okay, so as far as I remember, it was a hare or a rabbit that she said that she'd driven and she'd driven into this rabbit, and because of this rabbit, her car was smelling like death. Do you guys remember that? I don't know how many of you are Patricia Burns says squirrel. It could actually have been a squirrel. Let's see if there are any more comments. Now, if you think about Casey Anthony and you think about where Kaylee was actually found, and you think about the animal that is being associated, that they kind of do match in a way. Squirrels live in sort of undergrowthy areas, right? Right. But if you think about Kaylee Anthony, Casey's daughter, and you think about a squirrel, it's an interesting thing to think about. And now we're going from squirrels to chipmunks, right? So that's another thing just to consider. And now in this story, I'm not shooting Suzanne, I'm shooting chipmunks. And what sort of sounds do chipmunks make? How do chipmunks move? And if you think of this masculine attitude, I'm a big hunter. In theory, we don't know what exactly happened. But if you think of this sort of really masculine attitude, I shoot bears, I shoot deer. But when it comes to this particular prey, it's actually ridiculous. It's so easy. It's like shooting a chipmunk, right? It's like I don't want to say a walk in the park, but it's no challenge. You think about tracking and shooting a deer, and the sort of machismo that comes out of that. You think of shooting a bear and the ego that's involved in that, and then shooting a chipmunk. It's kind of silly even, right? And so, in this symbolism, if that's what is going on here, is something revealed through the symbolism, and then there's possibly, if you want to take it further, is this chipmunk, does it then in a weird way morph into a deer? Is it sometimes a deer, sometimes a chipmunk? does this chipmunk sometimes become quite a lot to handle? Was this deer, was this chipmunk once upon a time a beautiful deer? Just something to think about. Margaret Zabinski says, do they do this to keep their story straight? I don't think it's that. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't really say that. It's just the way the mind can work at times. So that's just something that I think you should consider. It is a true crime rocket science-ism, where you use the anthropomorphic in true crime, and there are a couple of instances of it. I'm sure if you go through more true crime, you'll find actually a lot more of those instances. I think the David Bain case in New Zealand actually comes to mind. I know there is a story in Australia where a dingo stole a child away that I think most people believe, or a lot of people believe. And then, so the question is, isn't that anthropomorphic, or is that actually the real thing, kind of thing? Okay, so let's continue. So it is really interesting that Barry just can't say anything about the blank between quite early in the afternoon, before 3 o'clock, and dinner time. Blank. I shot the chipmunks and then we made steaks. Well, okay. What happened like in a 3-hour intervening period? I truly don't recall that. Can you try? Can you make an effort? Special Agent Grussing told Barry that on the Saturday at 11, he told Morgan Gentile he was planning to take a hike or bike ride with Suzanne, but now he was unsure if his Fooz's hike was that day. Now, I'm not quite sure whether that information comes from Morgan Gentile. We're going to deal with the witnesses. So we've dealt with a lot of Barry's statements now. As we go into April, we're going to be dealing with a lot of what the witnesses said, which is going to make all of this even more interesting, because so far we've gotten one side sort of the story. And so the question is, does he remember telling Morgan this, or did Morgan say this? Well, it appears that Morgan remembered him saying, I'm going to take a hike or a bike ride. And it's quite interesting that he says it that way, because it's a hike or a bike ride. And then I guess it became a bike ride for Suzanne, but he didn't take it with her. And I think the other thing that's quite interesting is, did Barry ever ride a bike with Suzanne? My impression was that she always did that by herself. I could be wrong. It's just interesting. But if it's true that Barry never rode a bike with Suzanne, why would he say, I'm going to take a bike ride with her? Just something to consider. Barry said, I've not recalled what day that was. It could have been Saturday, but I just don't recall it. Every time Barry says, I don't recall, that little thing goes off in my mind where he said, you know what? I know when people say I don't recall, they're lying, or something like that. Well, Barry's saying I don't recall quite a lot. I mean, just before it said, I truly don't recall that. Now he's saying again, I've not recalled what day that was. And then he says, but I just don't recall it. Then he says, but I know it was in that probably 3-day period. I do remember that much, but it could have been Saturday. It could have been Friday. I just don't unintelligible recall. So Barry's kind of got problems with his memory. As I say, Barry can be extremely certain about certain things and then very vague in other things. Now we go to discussion of Exhibit 8. Special Agent Grussing showed Barry a photo of a Google Earth image around his house and the results of the telematics of his truck. So bear in mind what they're doing is they're saying, okay, Barry, you tell us what you were doing. And then Barry volunteers a certain amount. Then they show an exhibit and they say, this is what you were doing. Now tell us what's going on here. Can you see how it's kind of pressing in, the walls are sort of moving in. You can only say so much. You can only you can't really stray over the lines anymore. You kind of got to stick within the narrow area that the telematics are giving you. Can you see how that's happening? But you also see the clever way that the agents do this. They first get him to provide a version, and then they prod him along with their information. They don't sort of say, Barry, these are all our exhibits. Here they all are. Check them out. Okay, let's hear what you say. They hold them back, and then they gradually take him through the narrative. They're actually trying to drag as much narrative out of Barry as they can, and they're trying to see how he tries to, well let's put it this way, they see whether he's forthcoming and if or whether and to what extent he's possibly trying to dodge the path that is being taken down, that is trying to get off this path, if that makes sense. Anyway, so discussion of Exhibit 8, Special Agent Grissing showed Barry a photo of a Google Earth image and the results of the telematics of his truck from 2:47 p.m. until 9:25 p.m. on that Saturday. So this is the exact period that he can't remember. They're saying, okay, these are the telematics, your movements from about 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. on the night that she disappeared. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if he was preparing for his Broomfield trip. So Barry's until now kind of made this about it's a romantic night, and they sort of they split a steak. I'm not quite sure what they do after that, but then they make love, and then she sleeps, and the last thing he ever sees is that she's snoring. That's kind of his story. But Special Agent Grissing is saying, were you preparing for a business trip that night? Like, were you packing your truck? Were you opening the truck and closing the truck, going in and out the house, on this supposedly romantic night? I mean, he was calling it an amazing night, right? What was the other thing I wanted to mention here? I guess it's, can you imagine if they had done this right at the beginning? Can you imagine if very, very early on, remember this is April 5th, can you imagine if very, very early they'd said, hi Barry, we've got this Google Earth image with the telematics. In other words, if they'd played their hand very, very early on, I think one of two things could have happened. The one is that Barry would have just never ever spoken to them again, because it would have been a shock. Wow, you guys know this, right? The other one is that Barry would have gotten his story possibly more accurate much earlier on. And so the fact that this is only produced right at the end, I don't know this for a fact. I'm basing this on a fairly good knowledge of the affidavit, but the fact that this is presented so late, you can potentially say, on all of these different versions, he gave these different versions. And we know from the telematics, this is what was actually taking place. And so the question then comes up, why did he give these versions of this amazing night? Why would there be any need to embellish their last night together or their marriage? Given the circumstances, in other words, what's going on here? In other words, is there a good reason for suspicion? Is there a good reason for suspicion? So Special Agent Grissing asked Barry, were you preparing for your Broomfield trip? So, did I mention this before? This account of Suzanne laying out is consistent. Yes, okay. Barry, okay, so now we're on page 104. Barry said, yeah, just next part, unintelligible, packing clothes and tools and stuff. Now, remember, we've just mentioned the anthropomorphic side of true crime. Well, how often has it come up where someone says, in the middle of an emergency, I put tools into my truck, right? I didn't load a human body or human remains into my truck. I loaded tools. Oh, is that what you're doing? Chris Watts, what were you doing at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning? No, I was loading tools in my truck. Oh, is that what you're doing? Don Wells, what were you doing when you had to find summer? Oh, I went to my work site and I loaded tools in my truck. Oh, okay. That's also just an interesting aspect, is tools being loaded, were tools really loaded, kind of thing. Just something to bear in mind sometimes. So Barry says that night he was packing things, he was packing clothes, packing tools and stuff. What do you think the stuff refers to? Special Agent Grussing asked Barry if he wanted to review the times on the sheet, explaining he did not have much time to cook steak when his doors were opening and closing. So it almost seems like the agents kind of got to direct Barry to the document, to say, Barry, we actually kind of got a problem here. It's like, there's like Houston, we've got a problem. It's like, Barry, we've got a problem. You might want to look at this document. You've told us blah, 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 but based on the running in and out of the house and opening the car doors, when were you cooking the steak? What's going on here? And so Barry's got an answer to that. He says, Barry looks at the sheet, and I think they've got some photos of Barry doing that, and he's kind of got his glasses on the top of his head. And I think they're dark glasses, I'm not sure, but Barry said, yeah, I was just, what does he say? He said, and I was grilling the steak outside and probably doing things in my truck at the same time. I mean, I can assure you we grilled steaks and ate steaks that night. So what Barry's actually saying here is that in the middle of barbecuing, he was packing clothes and tools and stuff. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever barbecued in the middle of packing for a trip? Like, I'm gonna barbecue. I've got to watch I don't know exactly how some of you barbecue, but sometimes you've got to have the coals right, the right heat, and you've got to make sure you don't burn one side. Can you leave the steak sort of barbecuing and then kind of go and do something else? Pack and load things up, kind of thing. And from the telematics, it seems like he didn't just go and put a bag in his car and come back. He was kind of moving constantly. So anyway, Barry's story is that he's barbecuing, but the telematics are showing that he's also doing something else quite actively. And so this again is creating a question mark, right? And then Barry's kind of, I don't know if he's defensive, but Barry's kind of certainly reinforcing his point, saying, I was grilling the steaks outside. I was probably doing things, again, it's not very assertive. He says, I was probably doing things in my truck at the same time. And then he says, I can assure you we grilled steaks and ate steaks that night. He doesn't say, when I went to my truck, Suzanne sort of barbecued. She stood at the grill and she took over. Barry added, you should have seen the dishes. Did they see the dishes? And that's kind of a way of asking for evidence. Did you actually see evidence of what you ate that night? And they say, well, there's only one set of dishes. Barry, we've got another problem. It doesn't look like you had this romantic meal, right? It doesn't look like you put a lot of effort into this meal because it looked like only one person ate. And in a weird way, you seem to have a similar situation with Chris Watts. He also barbecues that night, but it doesn't seem like anyone else is participating in the barbecue. Special Agent Grussing said that Agent Graham found one set of dishes. Barry said, we just shared the same plate. While Barry was reviewing the telematic times, Special Agent Grussing asked, you were guessing sex happened, what, do you know when? So when did you have sex? Barry said, I know it was after the stakes and before I went to sleep. Special Agent Grussing asked if there was a gap, possibly an hour or two in between, and Barry said, I don't remember. Special Agent, and this part I've really highlighted here, Special Agent Grussing said agents were trying to fill in, I guess, the gaps. And Barry interjected with, so Barry kind of interrupts them to say, I want to help you guys. I want to help you guys get this clarified for your sakes and for my sake. I, to this day, don't even remember taking my bobcat to town to crib to do that Saturday. I don't know why that is gone from my memory, but I just don't recall it. So you kind of get a sense that Barry's, I don't know whether he's panicking or he's defensive, but it's quite a big statement he's making. He's saying, I'm trying to help you guys, I'm trying to help me. And he's saying, I've kind of had a memory wipe. I can't even remember taking the bobcat to town. Now, what's quite interesting with this, again, it's not dealing with 3 months earlier or 6 months later. It's dealing with the night that Suzanne disappears. And Barry's got this missing time where he just can't remember what he was doing, right? And you might say, yeah, I mean, can you remember what you were doing when X, Y, Z? Can I remember what I was doing on the day that I fell? Well, I can. I can remember the details pretty clearly. Can I remember the details in the minutes and hours before I fell? Very clearly. Can I remember what happened afterwards? Pretty clearly. It didn't happen very long ago, but, you know. And so I've obviously thought, why has it happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen? And so with Barry here, he's saying, I don't know why that has gone from my memory, but I just don't recall it, right? And so in the same way, I want to take you intertextually to two other cases where you have a similar fogginess at a crucial time. So these investigators are knocking on the door sort of over and over again. Barry, please just tell us what you know. What do you remember? What do you know? And the same thing happened with Jodi Arias. She kind of had a fog, and then the fog lifts. She has a fog over this crucial area, absolutely crucial area. I'm not going to take you through it, but if you know the Jodi Arias case, you know what I'm talking about. She has this fog descend at a crucial period in the timeline, a very crucial period, and then the fog lifts, right? You have, in a way, a similar scenario in the Amanda Knox case, where she has some kind of weird, I'm not sure what one can call it, epiphany. She sees a vision. She remembers something that she can't tell if it's real or if it's not real. But it's some kind of hocus pocus, memory wipe, weirdness going on, where at the crucial time, sorry, I don't really know. It could be anything. It's kind of like, right? So, yeah, you've got two other cases that have that similarity of a memory failure in the middle of the important fabric, or certainly the fabric that the authorities say is important. Now, you might be the defense lawyer and you can argue that's not got anything to do with the crime scene. That's not relevant, that's not important. And that's fair, and it's probably a good defense for your client. But from the prosecution side, you can remember all these other things, and often in quite a lot of detail. But with several hours, you can remember you split the steaks, that you ate the food. You can remember the actual food that you ate. You can remember that someone was snoring. You can't remember what you did for several hours on the last day that you were with somebody, right? And then he says, I don't know why this has gone from my memory, but I just don't recall it. So what are the authorities going to do with that? Is it just, pack your bags and that's it? We can't get anything more out of Barry. So this is what they do. They say, sorry, Barry goes on. He says, And I told Derek and Joe that same thing. I said, because they were beating me up on the time frame, and I'm like, I don't recall that, I don't recall that. And I know that I went through a lot of trauma before those questions, emotionally and mentally, and maybe that was it. But I got a pretty good memory. So he's kind of saying, I've actually usually got a good memory, but here I don't. I don't know why. And all of this is recalled verbatim in the affidavit, so they obviously think it's quite important. Then Barry says, Special Agent Grussing asked Barry when that last time he saw Suzanne was that night. Since he only heard her snoring Sunday morning, he replied, I would say, he's actually saying, so tell us about the last time you saw her Saturday night. So he said, I would say that happened between 8 and 9, if I was guessing. So once again, it's quite a wide range there. It's an hour, and it's also quite early. It's quite early that he's saying that's the last time I remember seeing her. Now we go to page 105. Special Agent Grussing asked if she went to bed nude or with pajamas, and Barry said, no, she never sleeps in the nude. I don't know if she was nude after when we had sex, but I don't know what she put on when she put it on. But she always puts stuff on. She doesn't sleep in the nude. I think one can go through his previous statements and look at what he said previously about that. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry when he last saw her, and he answered, probably during sex. He added, because like most men, I probably fell asleep pretty soon after that. Special Agent Grussing said that from the truck activity, sex must have happened after 9:25 p.m. It's quite clever what he's doing here, is taking Barry's statements on merit and saying, well, if that's true and the telematics are true, well, then this is the situation we're in. And so he's saying, well, if sex happened at 9:25 p.m., then she must have still been awake 25 minutes after you said that she was awake. Barry said, well, it could have been, depending on the light of the day then. It was May, so it's still, right now I see it's getting lighter and lighter, so I'm just kind of basing off light instead of clocks, not unintelligible clocks. So Barry's now kind of coming across vague again. He bases his time off the light of day, I guess, off the light. Now, if you think about what he's saying there, so Barry's not a very digital kind of dude. He doesn't think about deadlines or anything. He doesn't have fixed numbers in his mind. He just uses the light of day. Do you think that's true? Do you remember when he apparently set his alarm and it was set for a certain time, and he knew how long it was going to take him to get to Broomfield? So which Barry are we talking about? Is Barry a clocky kind of guy? Is he aware of number details, time details, deadline details, or is he a time of day kind of guy? That's quite an important thing to assert and assess, I think. Special Agent Grussing asked if Suzanne seemed out of the normal regarding their sex that night, considering the affair and fights that week. Now, that's the kind of question you could also have asked Chris Watts. So the sex that you had with Shanann that very last time, was it any different? What was going on there? Barry said, no, I've never had a feeling that anything was different in our sex life, never. And there's one of those absolute statements. Our sex life has always been absolutely wonderful. There's never been a kind of a weird moment. And yet there's this talk of him having numerous affairs, her in an affair, and what's the other one? Divorce. And so, they're talking about divorce, or one of them is thinking about divorce, and yet their sex life is still absolutely normal. Again, question mark, is it credible? And, can we add, how many question marks are we now adding? Are the question marks growing, or are they each one fizzling away? Special Agent Grussing referenced Barry's phone function of airplane mode being on at 2:47 p.m. So this is really interesting and important. So the question that was asked much earlier on in this interview was, Barry, what do you remember happening from the time you shot the chipmunk till you had dinner? And Barry can't remember. And then they've gone through some of the telematics of the truck and certain other things. Now the agent's actually saying, Barry, we know you put your phone, or your phone went into airplane mode for, how many hours is it? Is it almost 10 hours? From almost 3 p.m. In the afternoon. So yeah, around about 7 hours or so. From almost 3 p.m. until 17 minutes past 10 at night on Saturday. So during that period, his phone's in airplane mode. So does give you it gives you the impression that Barry seemed to be doing something, that he didn't want to be disturbed, or he didn't want to take calls, or there was a sense of, during this block of time, something. Maybe you could say, maybe you want to sleep, maybe you want to spend time with your partner, maybe this, maybe that. But that's 7 hours where something takes place. And certainly for possibly the first half of that, Barry can't really account for it, right? For the first half of the airplane mode period, Barry can't seem to account for it. Barry says now, and see, I don't recall that. And I think I told you that I don't recall that. And I'm wondering if that could have been her, meaning wondering if Suzanne put it onto airplane mode. Special Agent Grussing told Barry, I hope I don't cough, because coughing really hurts. Let's look at some of your comments. Caldonia says Suzanne must have been a good actress. Karina says many, many question marks. Stephanie says that's huge. Patricia Burns, around the same time that Suzanne stopped texting. That's also a good point. I don't know if you're reading ahead in the affidavit. Nisi says 3 to 4 hours unaccounted for, so much time. Terry Dean, he could have just said he wanted to unplug and be present for his wife. Simple, believable answer. Good point. Caldonia, who would be fiddling around with their phone at that hour? So someone asked earlier, was he cloning someone's phone? I think Ken asked that. When you look at what was going on with the phones, it doesn't seem that sophisticated, really. It's just airplane mode, right? And then comes off airplane mode. His explanation for it also isn't that sophisticated. I think she must have done it, right? Special Agent Grussing told Barry his phone was back in airplane mode at 4:32 a.m. Sunday morning. It's quite early, asking if he noticed that and noted Suzanne was not awake. So the agent is saying, did you notice that your phone went back into airplane mode? And did you notice that Suzanne was not awake? It's quite interesting questions. The airplane mode going on and Suzanne not waking up or not being awake. Were you aware that Suzanne was not awake? Barry shook his head and said, I just don't recall. How many times has he said it now? He added, I don't recall any of the airplane mode thing. He continued, not saying that I didn't, I could have, because we always talk about when we're going to have an intimate night, turning the phones off. So, but I don't recall that. So he's kind of saying, it could have been me, but I just don't remember. Special Agent Grussing asked about the 4:32 a.m. airplane mode function while Barry was preparing to leave to Broomfield. Barry said, I know that I could have been in the shower and she could have gotten up and turned it back on if she had turned it off. Easily could have done that because my phone is not with me in the shower. So I find that quite an interesting, in the same way we talk about this anthropomorphic stuff, anthropomorphic symbolism, if you want to call it that, putting tools in the place of a person. You have this quite interesting thing where I didn't put my phone into airplane mode, the victim did. The person who can't speak for themselves, they're the one that put my phone into airplane mode. They're the one who did suspicious stuff on my phone. But that to me is a level lower than what I think what could be leaking psychologically here, which is whether you believe Barry or not in terms of this version. What I think is quite interesting is it's this idea that my wife is going behind my back and fiddling with my phone. Now, in the scenario of Barry, you might be in some trouble. Oh, I think Stephanie's got to get going. What does she say? I have to get my son off the bus, be back in 10 minutes. Okay, see you soon. Bria's still with us. That's good. Is Sharon's here as well, so that's good. Is Jean here? Okay, so let's continue. What I'm getting at here is this idea, I'm talking about the psychology, where you say the investigator is possibly suggesting, possibly inferring, possibly bringing something up that could be incriminating, that could be suspicious, that could be difficult to explain innocently. How and why did your phone go in and out of airplane mode at these crucial times? Oh no, my wife did that. My wife was behaving suspiciously. My wife was fiddling with my phone behind my back. And so what I think that is actually possibly showing, possibly representing, is this familiarity of this person that you're in a relationship with, and I think just going both ways, that is spying on you, that is checking what you're doing, as I say, going both ways. And so Barry saying to the authorities that, oh, I think she put it into airplane mode, that to me is not as significant as showing that he was almost used to that, or that it seemed that he was used to this idea of devices being checked. And it just shows to what extent possibly the level of trust had been eroded away in their relationship, in their marriage, to what extent there was a knowledge of betrayal or a sense of betrayal, right? If we think about the Suzanne Morphew case, isn't it ultimately, doesn't what happens amount to a sense of being betrayed by somebody, and then a mutual sense of betrayal by the other person as well? And maybe one of those two individuals feels that the betrayal is too much for them to handle, or it's just absolutely unacceptable. But wouldn't you say that this story is actually a story about betrayal, but betrayal at a level that's becoming incredibly toxic? And now we get to page 106. Special Agent Grusing asked Barry to review a series of 20 photos of him walking to the McDonald's trash can. The first few photos depicted him carrying a small item in his hand. What do you think that item could refer to? This is completely speculative. They've got 20 photos. Barry's walking to the McDonald's trash can. This is on Mother's Day. I guess it's in the morning. And it seems to show him carrying something small in his hand. What do you think he's carrying? Let's have a look at what you guys say. What do you think Barry was carrying on the morning in his hand, something that's small enough to be described as small? What do you think it was? Ken Dalton says her phone. Suzanne's phone, that's from Ohio Gal. Sylvia Rogier, her clothes. Monique Dawn says tranquilizer medicine. Quite a few of you are saying phone. Zircon says phone or dart. Teresa says something mechanical. Bria says her clothes. Terry Dean says bike helmet. No, the bike helmet was left not far from the bike. Any other thoughts? Teresa says a part to something. So I'm going to hold something in my hand and see whether your thoughts change at all. What do you think that he may have been holding in his hand? Nisi says a SIM card. Caldonia says a smashed phone. Serendipity says security cameras everywhere. Monique Dawn says a weapon. Two Dog Knight says car keys. Ken Dalton says a pen. Do you think he was carrying a pen in his hand? Bria Lay says a knife. Kirk M says a phone. Nisi says the spy pen. Okay. Patricia says, I think it's more about the usual reasons, as in women not being allowed to leave their toxic partner. So what I think could have been in his hand, what I think could have been in those photos, was something that may have been about this size, and it may have been a tranquilizer dart or tranquilizer, what you used to fill the dart with. That's what I think it could likely have been. So a few of you have said, Shannon wrote here dart, someone else says phone, someone else says knife. Do you think you would want to throw in someone's phone in the garbage? Do you think that if you wanted someone not to find your phone, you threw it in the garbage and just tipped over in the garbage, do you think it would be lost forever? Two Dog Knight wrote cash. So anyway, that's my thought, that it's small enough to hold in the hand, and it could be a syringe. Of course, it could be anything. But what is quite interesting here is they say he was carrying a small item in his hand. Barry said, I know that I had a bunch of crap in my truck from cleaning off my workbench. And I do know that one of them was an old pair of boots that was ripped, and the other stuff. I just don't. Special Agent Grissing said that Barry had a small item in his hand and used one arm to push it down, then to push it further down as Barry was shown the photo. So Barry apparently put this item, seems like he put it right at the bottom of the trash can and then put other items over it. And so if you're the prosecutor or law enforcement, you can kind of imagine that this item might make you think it's got special significance, that it's more incriminating, right? And so what would be more incriminating? But then Barry answers this to say, first of all, it could be an old pair of boots, but why would you put boots at the bottom? Why wouldn't you want people to see boots? Then he said, yeah, the trash was heaping to the top, that's why. Just sitting in there. Then Special Agent Grissing asked if the photos helped Barry recall what the item was. And he said, no, I mean, it was just probably trash in the unintelligible. Special Agent Grissing showed Barry pushed the trash to the extent his whole shoulder was in the trash can. So Barry seemed to be going to a lot of effort to get rid of the small item in his hand. And so this item seems to be something that has really gotten the attention of the investigators. Doesn't that make sense? Barry seems to be going to a lot of trouble to dispose of this. Barry says, yeah, I don't even recall that. But so he's kind of been showing photos to say, we're going to help you remember this, but you can't remember it anyway. And there's a photo of Barry kind of, I don't know if I'm seeing it right, but he seems to be going like this. I don't know, he seems to be putting the side of his mouth into his cheek, like not smiling, but kind of looking down at that. Should I show it to you? Because I want to see. Let me just blow it up. Where is it now? There it is, okay. Okay, can you guys see that picture? Special Agent Grising showed Barry he pushed the trash to the extent his shoulder was in the trash can. Look at that sort of look on his face. Okay. Special Agent Grising said that Barry returned to the truck, grabbed another item, and walked it back to the trash can. Barry said, yeah. Barry was told anything he could remember helps investigation, that these appear to be two small items he disposed of. Two small items. Barry said, yeah, I couldn't tell you what that was. Special Agent Harris reviewed Barry's left turn from 225 to see the bull elk on Sunday morning, looking for the future shed, asking if he had to go up in elevation. Barry said no. Future shed, I think, refers to the point in time where the deer will shed its antlers. That's what I think that refers to. Barry said, no, I was just seeing their route. I just wanted to know, because they usually take the same route. So if a herd of elk is going to go up across the road at a certain place and go up there, then that's where I'm going to look for their sheds, right? The shed is the antlers. Special Agent Grising asked if Barry saw them and continued to look for their route as he went along. He said, no, I just wanted to see the direction because Colorado Trail is right off that parking lot, and it's pretty flat all through there, and it doesn't start going up till you get up to the railway tracks. So you can pick them and see them through the trees wherever they're going. Barry was asked if he was in a rush to get to Broomfield, and the elk distracted him. He said, there was no rush to get there. I'm just an early riser and an early go-getter. And so they're kind of saying, this seems a bit strange that you could either say he sets his alarm quite early or whatever, he wakes up quite early and then rides off after deer, kind of very early. So, are you in a rush or what? What's actually going on? He says, I wasn't in a rush. I'm just an early riser. And he says, if an animal gets in my interest, I'm going to take advantage of it. That's it. But I just went down, I watched where they went, turned around, and went right to Broomfield. Now, this is definitely speculative. I'm just interested in this from the perspective of psychology, where as someone who's interested in true crime looks at this and says, does this tell us anything about the kind of person Barry is? Hi, Stephanie. Does this self-disclosure reveal anything about Barry? And it's a question. It's not an answer. It's a question. And the question that's kind of being asked here is, in this volunteering of when I'm supposed to be going to work, whether you say it's fiction or not, but in this volunteering of going to work, I sometimes get distracted by a deer, right? When Barry is working, is he sometimes distracted by deer? And we're not talking about 1 day or 2 days, we're talking about weeks and months and years. Over the period that Barry's worked, is he sometimes distracted by deer? And by deer, I don't mean actual deer. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Just want to have a look at some of your comments here. Leah says seems counterproductive. Oh, well done, Ken. So to me, it's just something to bear in mind. Like I said, it's a speculation. It's really a rhetorical question. And it's this idea of, is this giving us a sense of who Barry really is? Someone who, on his way to work, in terms of work, he is sometimes, in terms of his own experience, it's not that unusual for him to be distracted by deer, right? And to me, it's potentially more interesting because it's coming from him. It's not projected onto him. It's not something law enforcement ask him. It's something he seems to sort of volunteer. It's part of his narrative. Just something to think about. And you might put that down, put that aside as a theory, and then see whether you get any reinforcement somewhere else. So he says, I'm going to take advantage of it. That's it. But I just went down. I watched where they went, turned around, and went right to Broomfield. Now it's got Broomfield right at least. Agent showed Barry the photo of a SG, is it SG-11? Mini DV operating manual for a camera, which Special Agent Harris explained was recovered in the bathroom drawer. Now, bear in mind, this digital video operating manual, so the instructions are recovered in the bathroom drawer as well as something else. Let's check your knowledge. Anyone else know what was also recovered from the bathroom drawer? Let's see how well you guys know this case. Terry Dean says no longer Broomsfield. Sharon asked whether Barry is courting the lady he met Sunday at the new worksite. I don't think he actually did meet her. He did meet someone on the Saturday. That's right. Monique Dawn says there's a contract. Serendipity says spec drawings of the wall. Monique Dawn says Broomfield contract. That's right. Jasmine Anderson says papers from the wall job. Absolutely. Okay, good to see you guys are paying attention. So that was also in the bathroom drawer. So now we're getting a little bit more of an idea that the bathroom seems to be something where certain things were done, possibly. Barry said, yeah, and I never used it. So they're saying, Barry, we found this operating manual for a camera. And Barry said, yeah, I never used it. I bought it because I thought I would use it as a game camera. A little thing, and it was cheap, and my game cameras. Special Agent Grusing interrupted and said the camera was not found in the search of the house. Very interesting. So there's a manual for the camera, but the camera itself isn't there. So somebody else, I think Ken asked earlier, could Barry have cloned her phone? And I said, I don't know if it's that sophisticated. This might address that more completely, that question. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever owned a operating manual for a camera, but not the camera itself? You know those little books you get when you buy a camera? Have you ever owned an operating manual for a camera, but not the camera itself? Sharon, I'm not sure if you're talking about Morgan Gentile, but he met Morgan Gentile on the Saturday. They didn't actually meet up on the Sunday, as far as I'm aware. Serendipity says no. Monique Dawn, not really. Nisi, never. Sharon Drury says yes. Stephanie says no. Zircon says yes. Yeah, but it's when you get it got stolen, that's a different. Sharon says no. Karina says no. Yvonne Phillips says no. Let me ask the question again. Have you ever owned a operating manual for a camera, right? You own the operating manual for the camera, but you don't actually own that camera, and you never did. So you've got the manual. So here's a kind of a good example. Here's a Boy Scout Handbook of America, and I've never been a Boy Scout in America. What am I doing with this handbook, right? So have you ever owned a manual for a camera, but you've never actually had that camera? Because that's what he's saying here. He's saying, yeah, and I never used it. Oh, hang on. That's not what he's saying. He's saying I bought it because I thought I would use it as a game camera. So he's not saying I bought the manual. He's saying, hang on, he says, a little thing, and it was cheap, and my game cameras. So that's quite interesting, is that Barry's saying here that he bought the camera, he's got the manual for the camera, but he's saying that I never used it. And the camera is not found in the search of the house. So you could also speculate that could the camera have been what he pushed down into the trash can? That small thing that he had in his hand, could that have been a camera? A camera is also something that Jodi Arias disposed of in a washing machine in the Travis Alexander case, right? So I just didn't quite read that with the right amount of comprehension. They find the camera manual. Barry said he has the camera, but I've never used it. And then the agent actually interrupts him to say, you know what, Barry, we didn't find the camera in your house. What do you say about that? And Barry said, I don't even know what happened to it. I don't know. I know that I bought it and it was tiny. And I think as soon as I got it, I tried to get it working and couldn't, and thought it was just junk, and I got ripped off. So what happens when Barry has something and it doesn't work out? Seems like, well, he says, I thought it was junk. But he doesn't say that he threw it away. But he describes it as junk. What do you do with junk? So he describes it as tiny. So I guess that could be what he had in his hand. Special Agent Grusing asked when he bought the camera compared to when Suzanne went missing. Quite an interesting question. Now we're on page 108. Barry replied, I don't recall. Special Agent Harris said the manual was found at the top of items in the drawer. So it's not like at the bottom. It's at the top of the items in the drawer in the bathroom. Special Agent Grusing asked Barry to confirm he did not get it to work. So he's saying, Barry, can you confirm that you couldn't get the camera to work? Barry said, yeah, I tried to get it working and I couldn't. I just thought, Special Agent Grusing asked if he tried to mount it outside like a game camera. And Barry said, no, never. I couldn't get it working. It's quite a on-the-chin question. So that's obviously where the investigators' minds are now. They are certainly in terms of their investigation, are trying to narrow their possibilities. Let's look at some of your questions. Stephanie says, I wonder what that camera had on it. So Suzanne had a spy pen. Did Barry not have a spy camera? And bear in mind, what a camera can do is record not just someone talking, but also what they're doing. Alley Cat says, great to catch you. Welcome, Alley Cat. Camera has one job, couldn't get it working. Good point. Okay, so discussion of Exhibit 14. Special Agent Harris reviewed photos of the safe. This is also really interesting, in Barry's garage. So they're looking at photos of the safe in the garage, and what they notice is there are items piled in front of the safe. I also noticed that. And now he's addressing his concern that, I think he's addressing Barry's concern that Suzanne took money from the safe. So in other words, it's like this idea of, did Suzanne take money from the safe? So let's put it like this. Did Suzanne want to take money from the safe, go to the garage, open the safe, take the money, close the safe, and then put a lot of things in front of the safe, sort of pile sort of stuff against the safe, and then leave, right? Special Agent Grissing showed Barry a photo of the contents of the bottom of the safe, noting that the scope looked like the scope mounted on the Chipmunk gun. So why is there a scope? Why is the possible scope that was mounted on the Chipmunk gun inside the safe? So you're also kind of getting this idea that the safe is somehow involved in the fabric here, right? There's money in the safe, there are guns propped against the safe, there's gun equipment inside the safe. And now there's this weird thing of the scope for the Chipmunk gun being inside the safe. That seems a bit strange. Barry looked at the photo and said, yeah, it does. Now, think about what the investigators are talking about. They found what they think is the scope for the Chipmunk gun inside the safe, but they also found a camera handbook in the bathroom, but on top of everything else. So could Barry have bought it recently and used it recently and then gotten rid of it recently? Question. Barry actually acknowledges that the scope does look like the Chipmunk gun scope. He said, I could have mounted that after the fact. It's quite an interesting way of putting it. I could have mounted that after the fact. I think what he's saying is, I could have used the scope on the Chipmunk gun after you took that photo. I'm not sure if that's what he's getting at. Special Agent Grissing said that was why agents asked him earlier about the scope being on the gun, clarifying he could have mounted after the fact. Now Barry shook his head and said, yeah, I just don't recall. Special Agent Grissing told Barry the serial matches the one on the squirrel gun, and Barry said, yeah. Now discussion of Exhibit 17. Now what I find quite incredible with all this is that Barry actually doesn't put a stop to this, that Barry doesn't say, I've got to go, I'm trying to help you guys, I've got a headache or whatever, but that Barry actually just keeps going through all of their questions. Don't you guys find it surprising? What I'm kind of saying is, doesn't Barry get a sense that they are, that they've found something, and that he either could be incriminating himself, or that, don't you get that sense that he probably shouldn't be talking beyond this point? And so why is he? Rebecca says he wants to know what they know. Yeah, Thought Criminal says it's chess. Barry wants to know what they know. Because each time, how can I put it? Each new hand is them revealing what they know. So that is a really good answer. Terry Dean says, you don't take scopes on and off. It takes precision to mount them correctly. Good point. Thought Criminal says, seems like the investigators know a lot. I think you're right, Sleuth and Sandals. Okay, so discussion of Exhibit 17. Special Agent Harris showed Barry photos of Suzanne's wallet, cash, driver's license, hydration packet, medication, and other items recovered from her Range Rover. Special Agent Grissing said that considering the evidence, it does not appear Suzanne chose to disappear. And now we're on page 109. Barry said, and I've never thought that. And that brings up footnote 77. Footnote 77 reads, after being told of the affair, Barry asserted multiple times that Suzanne must have left on her own, which is why her personal documents, wallet, money, and Camelback waterback were shown to him. So it's quite interesting. They tell Barry about the affair. Barry says, okay, I know what happened. She left on her own, right? She left on her own accord. She left voluntarily, right? And so now it's, okay, so why are all these personal documents, her wallet, her money, her personal documents, also the Camelback, why is all of that left behind? Why is her car left behind, right? And he's saying that I never thought that. Anyway, Special Agent Grissing showed Barry photos of the binder recovered in the search of his truck and the documents inside, which appeared to be mail. Barry was told no documents from EA Outdoors for the Broomfield site were recovered. And Special Agent Harris and Barry previously told agents he was studying documents for his job in Broomfield. This is quite an interesting sort of detailed area that's also sticky nevertheless. It's like, you might say, yeah, he took some documents with him, he took a couple of documents, big whoop. But now it's like, okay, what was the actual document? What papers did you have with you? And Barry's answer was that it was the job site documents. That's assuming that the job site was legitimate, or that's why they really were there. Conversely, if they really weren't there, or if he really wasn't there for the job site, it makes you wonder, what documents did he have with him, why, etc. And so this is what's being dealt with now. So Barry was told no documents from EA Outdoors for the Broomfield site were recovered. Where are those documents that you apparently had? And they say that they know that he was studying documents for his job. Special Agent Grissing asked, did you throw the job documents away? Now, apparently, remember, he said it was a big job. It's a job that he specially went there on Mother's Day to do. So where are the papers for this job? There's this big job that he had to, make special plans to get up early to go and do. Okay, so where are the papers for that job? And so he says, I left them there for the workers. Does that sound, how can I put it? Does that sound reasonable? Would you, as a boss, leave the paperwork for your workers? Now, I suppose if you don't know too much about exactly what he was doing, you might say, yeah, they would go through the contract and they would go through everything. Do you think that that's likely? Thought Criminal says she's got to start dinner, so good luck with that. Anyway, so Barry says, no, I left them there. I left the documents for the workers. That's quite an easy thing to check, is you go and ask those workers, did you find documents related to the job in the hotel room? Or did Barry tell you to go and have a look at the documents that he left behind for you? It's quite simple. Special Agent Grissing asked if he left the documents in the hotel room, and he said, yeah, I should have. Special Agent Grissing asked if Barry told Morgan he was leaving the papers, and he said, I don't know. Everything was so crazy that day. And here are some more photos of Barry. How do you think, just from his demeanor, what do you think, how do you think he's looking and feeling? Let's just have a look here. Okay. It's it's quite interesting how many photos they have of Barry throughout this whole process. You almost get the impression that they are seeing something in his face. Are they seeing something in his face or aren't they? What are they seeing? Monique Dawn says he looks worried. Barry was shown photos of the dart boxes recovered from the search and asked if he recalled what all areas around the house he fired them. So now they're asking, so just tell me, where have you fired this tranquilizer dart on your actual property? And so now he's saying, no, I don't recall. Barry is not recalling a lot at this point. He says, I know I've fired from the breezeway before, and I fired them from the garage at deer that were up on the hill behind the rock wall. Barry was asked if he ever missed a shot, and he said, a deer? Oh, no. He continued, no, I used to raise deer. I've shot hundreds. So once again, Barry's absolutely certain here. Barry doesn't make a mistake. He's never missed a deer. Special Agent Grussing asked if it was ever fired in the house. This is quite a big question. Think about what he's asking. Barry, did you fire tranquilizer dart inside your house? Now, what do you think the possibilities are for doing that? Do you think there was a chipmunk running through the house? Do you think there was a deer running through the house? So he's asked, did you ever fire tranquilizer dart in the house? So you can tell what law enforcement think happened. Barry said only if it was open in that door in that breezeway, but not inside the house. So that's not a no. He's asked quite a simple question. Did you ever fire the dart gun in the house? He doesn't say no. He says only if it was open in that door in that breezeway, but not inside the house. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry how he wakes up a deer when it is out. It's also quite an interesting question. And I think it's quite interesting because, and it's not really nice to say, but whatever happened to Suzanne, the question is, at what point was Suzanne immobilized? And at what point did she breathe her last? Right? And I want to compare that to a deer. If you shoot a deer and you immobilize it, and then you later decide, for whatever reason, I don't want to bring this deer back to life, or whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? So was there a period where Suzanne was immobilized, and then how long did that period last, and kind of what happened? And we've spoken about this 3 to 4 hour period where Barry can't seem to remember anything. And so is there any relationship between the one and the other? Is there a potential relationship? Terry Dean says, catching you live is the best birthday present I could ask for. Oh, happy birthday, Terry. Everybody, it's Terry's birthday. Thanks a lot. I should be giving you something. Thank you for your valuable time and insight. Thanks a lot, Terry. Thanks a lot for that. I hope you have a lovely day. Do you get what I'm saying? So he's asked, how do you wake up a deer when it is out? And Barry says, so Barry's not, I don't recall, or I don't have any idea. Now Barry's got great expertise. He says, you got to reverse it. He says, just give it a shot and a chemical in their something. I guess it's in their bloodstream. So he knows exactly how, Barry seems to be quite sophisticated in this area. He knows how to use chemicals to sedate an animal. He knows how to bring them out, right? Barry was asked if he had that chemical. This is the chemical that you get the animal out of its sedated state. And Barry said, I don't know if I had any left or not. I don't recall. It seems also kind of strange that he, wouldn't you know if you had or you didn't? But it also shows, I think, what law enforcement are thinking about is that they seem to be thinking, certainly they seem to be exploring the possibility. That's certainly how I'm in. They don't say it explicitly, but they seem to be saying, they seem to be suggesting that Suzanne could have been taken out of a tranquilized state. She could have been subdued, immobilized, and then taken out of that tranquilized state. And who knows, maybe her hands were tied, maybe she was put in her bed, maybe she was, who knows, but maybe she was then interrogated, maybe, who knows, but that does seem to be what they are wondering about. If you can do it to an animal, could you have done it to a person? And Barry says, I don't know if I had any of this chemical that reverses it. I don't know. Barry was asked the name of the chemical, but he could not recall it. He said he could make a phone call and added, I don't recall having any left. Barry said they are fired like a bullet, and when asked if they have an expiration date, he said they have one. So he seems to know quite a lot about it. Discussion of Exhibit 20. Barry was shown photos of the interior of his truck with the tools, trash, and disorder when it was photographed by law enforcement. He said nothing looked out of place. When asked what was in the backpack, he said clothes, just clothes for staying overnight. So they pertinently wanted to know, Barry, what's going on, what's in the backpack? I wonder what law enforcement think was in the backpack. Was there a phone in the backpack? Was there food? Was there anything else? Discussion of Exhibit 23. I'm not really going to read this. It's just to do with salacious images on his phone. But I do find it quite weird that you have actual photos on Barry's phone, but Barry never, what does he say? Anyway, I'm not going to deal with that part. It's just quite strange, like saying, we've got this thing on your phone that shows you did something. Did you do that? No, I didn't. I find that just quite interesting. When asked about any searches for meeting girls, Barry said, well, you can obviously see that I never looked for a girl on my phone or online. I mean, there's nobody out there. So, I mean, if there was, you guys could, if anybody could, you guys could. Now, again, where Barry says, you can obviously see that I never looked for a girl on my phone or online. Well, I don't know, if you're looking at pictures of girls on your phone, are you not looking at a girl on your phone? He says, you can obviously see that I never looked for a girl, not at a girl. Yeah, so is it a big jump to looking at a girl to looking for a girl? And remember what I said earlier about interrupting his work because he's distracted by a deer. Is there a link between that and this? Question mark. Just something to think about. What's this got to do with that, if anything? Is this relevant? When asked about, okay, so Special Agent Grusing discussed something texting and said his girls and Suzanne shared things he did not know about. Barry said, me and my daughters are pretty close. I mean, if there's bits and pieces there, then yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But if it's a long conversation about, I guarantee you my daughters had no idea about the affair. Special Agent Grusing asked if his daughters still did not know about the affair as someone walked in the room and Barry stood up. Agents followed him outside and spoke by his truck, so there's a bit of an interruption here. Barry said, oh, you asked me if they knew about the affair. I did tell them. So that's quite interesting. He says, he said, yeah, I guarantee you my daughters had no idea about the affair. And then when they were asked about if his daughters still did not know, someone came into the room. And so they went outside, and then Barry said, I did tell them. Barry was asked how that went, and he said, not very good. That just seems just quite an interesting moment. It seems like 1 minute he said one thing, the next, he says, I guarantee you my daughters had no idea about the affair. Then he says, I did tell them. Barry was asked if he told them both at the same time, and he said, yep, I just sat them down and I said, girls, I don't want to ever keep anything from you, and I don't want you to think bad about your mother, but I think this is important for you to know. And I told them, and they cried. They got angry, but I think it was the right thing to do. That brings up footnote 78. 78 reads, this contradicts Barry's earlier statements that same day to the FBI that he had not told his girls about the affair. What's quite interesting, we're not getting all of the statements here. These are statements to the FBI that they're referring to here. But what is quite interesting here is how Barry says, I don't want you to think bad about your mother, and then tells them about that she's been having an affair. I don't want you to think badly about your mother. Your mother's been having an affair. So what happens? He also says, I don't want to ever keep anything from you. Do you think that's true? What I'm kind of mean is Barry's saying to his daughters, I don't want to ever keep anything from you. If you take his statements to law enforcement, and even just this, where they say, this contradicts Barry's earlier statements, do you think when Barry's sincere and he says, I don't ever want to keep anything from you, and I don't want you to think bad about your mother, do you think that's sincere? Okay, so that's just something to look at. And if you take that question, is he sincere with what I said earlier about on his way to work, he might be distracted by a deer, and also what we mentioned without sort of mentioning it. Do they all mix together? In a previous live, I just asked a question, do you think Barry's kind of a deep guy? Is he a deep person, or is he superficial? Another way of asking that question is, do you think that Barry's a deeper person than Suzanne? Or do you think she's deeper, that he's more superficial than she was? And so at this point, Barry says, yeah, well, I got to get back. So in terms of talking about the what he told his daughters, now at this point, he kind of wants to end the interview. Special Agent Grissing said the last item, so Barry seems to be trying to shut this down now, at last. But they've got one more thing they want to show him, and it's quite interesting. Grissing said the last item was Barry's texting Suzanne from July to October 2020, and he was asked why he was texting her. It's quite a good question. Why is Barry texting Suzanne from July, August, September, October? That's 4 months. Why are they texting each other for 4 months, right? And there's quite a lot of texting between Shanann Watts and Chris Watts, even when they are in North Carolina together. So let me ask you a quick question. What do you think it can mean when couples who are sort of in the same place, in the same house, are texting one another? And if you've got any experience in that, let us know. Nisi says fighting. Stephanie says reminds me of the Wattses. Monique Dawn says distance in the relationship. Yeah. So, I mean, you are right by one another, but you're not really talking. Yeah, so that's Stephanie's got it there. They're not talking. They can't. One of them at least can't bear to talk to the other one, so now they're texting. Sleuth and Sandal says giant house, easy to live separate lives. Yvonne Phillips says not wanting a confrontation experience. Don't want to be in the same room. All of that is correct. So, and this was going on for months. And this was up until October 2020. And so, Barry, why were you texting? And Barry says, it was just an outlet for me to try to deal with my pain. Barry was asked if he was actually texting her message content, and he said, I think they couldn't actually retrieve some of this. Somehow they seem to know texts were sent, but they couldn't seem to see what it was. Anyway, because they're asking what it was about, he said, I texted if she could see it. I was texting as she was, as if she could read it. And I knew deep down in my heart that she probably wasn't reading them, but it just kind of gave me comfort that I was talking to her. Yeah, I guess, sorry. So I think it's a bit late and I'm a little bit tired. This texting was July to October 2020, not 2019. So it wasn't, he was actually just texting her after she disappeared. It's not it's not that they were texting one another because they were arguing. But it is quite weird, isn't it, from Barry? The other thing to think about here is there was staged text from Chris Watts that went on for a while, and also staged text from Patrick Frazee. And so one wonders, was this staging? Bear in mind, it looks like there was a bicycle that was staged. Barry says, I'll look into it. I can tell you right now what everyone was. It was, I love you, I miss you, I'm not going to stop looking for you. Just things like that to make me feel better. Yeah. And do you remember when Barry said in the previous interview that he was going to stop looking? Barry added, and I just assumed that you guys had the phone, meaning Suzanne's phone. But I thought if there was a chance, if she had it and could see something, but like I said, I mostly did it to make me feel better. Could there be another reason he may have done it? If he says, I assumed you guys had the phone, and he's texting, I love you, I miss you, I'm not going to stop looking for you, isn't that going to make him look quite good? If the police are holding her phone, which, by the way, I don't think they are, but if they were, isn't that going to make him look quite good? Let's go on. Yeah, I think we're almost at the end. Special Agent Grusing said the FBI would search with law enforcement for the phone and for Suzanne, asking Barry where he thinks we should concentrate. In other words, where should we look for the phone and for Suzanne? Barry says, I would say the river. He says that makes more sense to me than anything. I don't understand why somebody hasn't been out there before now. When the river was low, I mean, heck, they spent 140 grand to dig up a job site that there's no way she was at. So here he's again complaining about money that was spent in a certain way. Special Agent Grusing said the issue investigators have with the river is Suzanne's helmet being placed away from the bike, placed as possibly a diversion, indicative of foul play. Barry's response to that is, yeah. So he agrees with that. And as far as I know, that is as far as the interview goes on April 5th. I'm going to take you just through 2 pages or 1.5 pages of the April 22nd interview, which is the very last one. It goes on about another 9-10 pages. So I'm going to read the first page and a half, and then I'll do the last section of those pages as part 3 to this. So, and that'll bring us to around about 2.5 hours. I don't want to go on too much longer than that. So this is now the final interview. April 22nd, 2021. I think he was arrested on May 5th, if I'm not mistaken. In this interview, FBI agents showed Barry their audit results and discussed them, directly telling him in the end that Suzanne was not conscious Saturday evening, May 9th, or Sunday morning, May 10th. In other words, almost saying she's not alive, kind of saying she's not conscious, but that by inference, maybe she's not alive, right? Just have a look at your comments here. Okay, let's wrap up. Barry admitted to disposing of the tranquilizers. He confirmed his last encounter with Suzanne was hearing her light snore. So even the FBI think this is quite important. He explained his locations in the woods around his house on May 9th as looking for a turkey. He agreed the evidence in this case makes him look bad, but it's in God's hands. The agents told Barry that from his own words, when he says, "I don't recall," that means he is lying, because he answered almost all of the audit questions with "I don't recall." I actually think they should count them. They should count the "I don't recall." I wouldn't be surprised if there are 50 or more. Now we go to page 112, and this is just the last section I'm going to deal with. At about 10:45 a.m., Special Agent Grissing and Special Agent Harris met Barry at France Reservoir in Salida, Colorado, at his request. So it seems like Barry wanted to see them. Barry arrived driving his Bobcat, parked, and then greeted agents and thanked them for meeting him. Barry stated that he was sorry. He said, "Yeah, I'm working right here. Sorry, we couldn't move, get somewhere else a little less windy." So obviously found a somewhat out of the way place. He said, "I got a couple workers over there, so hopefully we can move pretty quickly." I think I'm just going to take a quick pain pill just before I finish here. If I get a bit woozy, you know why. He says, I'm working right here. Sorry, we couldn't get somewhere a little less windy. And he says, "And I got a couple workers over there, so hopefully we can move pretty quickly." Special Agent Grissing told Barry that it was up to him how much he wanted to accomplish today. Special Agent Grissing asked how Barry is doing, and he says it had been tough for he and I think it's the girls, I guess, the daughters, with Suzanne's birthday on the 30th, and the 10th is coming up. Special Agent Grissing explained that he and Special Agent Harris have put together an audit that is sort of like an inspection, and that agents would like to show it to him and discuss some of the answers that is given and determine where Barry is today. Special Agent Grissing said he would like to hand it to Barry and go through it with him, and he agreed. Special Agent Grissing directed Barry's attention to the second sentence and said that Barry, as her husband, is the last person that saw her, and that it seemed that May 9th is the last time Barry saw her, and May 10th is the last time he heard her breathing. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if that is correct, and Barry said yes. That's quite a big admission. Footnote 79 reads, I don't actually have it here. Anyone know what footnote 79 is? Is anyone reading through that? So I've cut it off here. Special Agent Grissing then mentioned the last proof of life, independent of Barry, is when she's talking to her lover when he comes home. And I must say, I find this so elementary, but so brilliant. It's sort of it's simple. It's not rocket science, but it's nevertheless clever. But before we get to that, Barry was asked where the $30,000 from the GoFundMe page for Suzanne went and whether it was used to pay for the Longhorn Ranch property. So by now the authorities are even wondering what is going on with Barry and money. What's going on there? And so I asked him about that, and Barry said, I don't recall where money went. But like I said, a lot of that money, I paid George $4,000. Now they want to know where $30,000 went, and now he says, well, I paid George $4,000, okay, and the $26,000. And then he said he stopped working. He says, I paid a lot of things out of that money, but I don't recall a lot of what it was. It's kind of not a great answer. It's a simple question. Barry, what did you do with the $30,000? Did you search for your wife? Did you pay searches? What did you do? I don't recall what I did with a lot of the money. So, would be interesting to know what did happen to that money. Anyway, they want to know, did he use it to pay for a property? Did he buy some property with that? Special Agent Harris explained to Barry that agents want the fullest picture, and when things are missing after behaving consistently, there's a question of what changed. This is the part that I think is so brilliant. Special Agent Harris explained to Barry that Suzanne's phone behavior is one of these places because Suzanne consistently sent either good night or good morning messages to her lover, and that there's an absence of those messages on Saturday evening and Sunday morning. So it's like clockwork. Suzanne would always either say good night or good morning. It was either the one or the other, consistent day after day after day after day. And then when she disappears, neither of those messages on either day, not on the Saturday evening or the Sunday morning. Special Agent Harris told Barry that looking at the evidence, it seems likely something happened to Suzanne's phone, something happened to Suzanne, or both, since she's not saying something to her lover before she goes to bed. And Barry actually nods his head in response, and he says yes. Oopsie. Barry doesn't offer another alternative to that. In other words, at this point, the investigators have narrowed things down quite a lot. And they present a fairly vanilla scenario to Barry, and he agrees with it. Stephanie says Jeff should have contacted authorities. He certainly should have. It's interesting that doesn't seem to be any ill will towards Jeff. Okay, so that is it. I'm not going to go further than that. We're on page 112, and we've got 10 pages left of Barry's statement. So that is it. I'm not really going to go much further. I'm quite tired. It's 11 o'clock here at night, and I'm gonna have to skedaddle. Patricia says he is supposed to be a businessman and he expects us to believe he cannot keep track of his funds. Thanks a lot, Two Dog Night. Everyone, remember it's Terry Dean's birthday, so please join me in wishing her a great rest of your birthday. And thanks a lot for the super chats. Thank you to all of you who were present today. It's good to see you all again. I know I said I was going to take you through my injury, but I'm a little bit too too tired for that. Maybe I'll do it in the next live. I hope I haven't let you down. Leah says, good night, Nick, Timmy, and everyone. I don't know if you saw, Ivy made a very brief appearance, but you know what cats are like. They are the way they are. Thanks a lot for that, Nisi. Thanks to all the members who are here. Thank you to Bria, who's tuning in from France, I think. Ali Cat says, what happened? This happened. And something under that arm as well. So yeah, didn't want to gross you guys out too much about that. But I'll talk to you guys a little bit about the events surrounding that. And I might scrounge some photos to put together for you guys as well. Thanks, Bria. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was really nice coming back and seeing a couple of new reviews on Amazon. I still want to continue with Vincent van Gogh. I'm not quite sure when we will. Thanks a lot, Sleuth and Sandals from Australia. Thanks a lot. Karina says sleep is the best medicine. Definitely agree with that. I actually think sleep is part of the reason why I got injured, but I'll talk to you guys about that. Christine says, get some rest. Happy birthday, Terry. Okay, so thanks, Ellie Cat. Patricia says, I've got COVID right now. Okay, well, we all thinking about you. Are you fairly okay, or are you feeling rotten? Hope you feel better. I guess a couple of us are struggling a bit with aches and pains and whatnot. Anyway, Patricia, I hope you can feel this. From all of us here. And yeah, just rest and try and, eat right, I guess, if you can. Thanks a lot, Patricia. You too. Okay, guys, I'm not going to take it further. Good to see you all again. Thanks a lot to you guys for tuning in. But everyone, take care of yourselves. Take care of those close to you, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, ciao.